Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers when we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. So today I have a special guest, Dr. Drew Remignati. And he is, besides being an author, because that's how he got here, right? He has written a book called The Healing Connection that he's going to tell you about. He's also been an emergency room physician for 40 years and a patient for 50 years. And he approaches this book from both perspectives, from the perspective of being a patient and the perspective of being a physician, with the emphasis on the importance of the physician-patient relationship. So say hi to Dr. Drew. Hey, Drew.
Hi, Karen. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. I was looking forward to this conversation. So let's start with what motivated you to actually sit down and write.
Well, it was in 2014 when I decided I got to think about when I'm going to end my career because I wouldn't say I was getting burnt out in healthcare like a lot of people are, but I was getting a little bit toasty. So I thought I decided to pick 2020, April in 2020, the April because it's my birth month and I was going to turn 68 that year, and the 20 because that made a nice round 40 years of practice from graduating medical school in 1980. But I had a nice, and I figured if I go any longer, I might become a hazard to my patients. So the nice thing about that, it was kind of a 6-year tunnel, and but I felt a sense of relief having an end game in plan. And then I
So
decided
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say I knew once I retired, I was going to stop seeing patients, but I was not going to stop thinking about healthcare and medical issues after all that exposure for decade upon decade upon decade. So what was I going to do with my time? And that's when I conceived of the idea of writing a book. And
Oh, okay. And who's this book for? Who do you
yeah, I,
hope will read it?
I kind of broke a cardinal rule there. I don't know if it's true about fiction, like you're right, but when I was looking for guidance on how to approach the idea of writing a book, one of the first pieces of advice you come across repeatedly is decide who your audience is and write to those people. And I didn't like the sound of that because I said, I'm writing about healthcare. Who am I going to leave out? Nobody's just naturally left out of that equation. So you're not supposed to say, I wrote my book for everybody, but I'm going to say it anyway. There you go. And the subtitle of my book is It's the Healing Connection, a partnership for your health. And one of the main things I encountered both is that we were trained in the generation before mine to be passive recipients of healthcare advice and go to the doctor and hear what you're supposed to do and just do it. Don't ask questions. Don't participate really. That's an outdated model of healthcare. And that's why the subtitle for my book is A Partnership for Your Health. When you come to see me as a patient, we've entered into a partnership, and the goal of that partnership is your health. And I'm going to be as committed to making that business process succeed as you should be, but I expect you to be equally involved. And the interesting thing, when I started to do all the research for my book, the patient-physician relationship is something you learn about in medical school, and it's the power within it is something I experienced both as a physician and as a patient. And it's not just a feel good, sound good concept. When I did the research for my book, I said, well, I got to hang it on something more than it looks good, sounds good. There's scientific evidence, study after study, which show that if you become a more knowledgeable patient about your medical conditions, and you become more engaged with your physician in the planning of the treatment for your medical conditions, you subsequently become more adherent to that plan that you've jointly agreed upon. And ta-da, your mortality rate risk is cut in half. study after study. Wow, I said, well, that can't
That's
be.
amazing. That's so interesting. You said that about the generation before, and because I must have come in the middle because when I was a young patient, I was treated just as a body. I mean, doctors didn't even want to look you in the eye or talk to me or anything. But then subsequently, as time went on, I learned that I needed to be a partner, and I had amazing doctors who looked at it that way, who listened. But then, and I don't know if we're going to get into this. I didn't even tell you that I was going to ask about this, so you can say to me, Karen, let's
Yeah,
move on.
no, I'm not been any idea.
But but one of the things that I've noticed is that caring doctor, that doctor that really listens to you and takes notes and researches to find out what's going on here and is there a solution. I had a physician like that, but then he couldn't afford it. He couldn't afford to be that kind of doctor because he couldn't see enough patients. So I don't know if we're going to address that as we're talking about the patient-doctor relationship.
Well, I certainly address that in my book. And that's one of the motivations for writing the book is I encapsulate it by saying that my experience was that on a good friend of mine from medical school, after reading my book, said, "Boy, Drew, this sounds like this all happened on our watch." He felt a little bit odd about it. I said, "Yeah, the patient-physician relationship has been reimagined as a consumer-provider relationship because the business people basically took over healthcare on our watch." Now, if they had announced this is what we're going to do, we might have been able to say, whoa, 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 that doesn't make any sense. We're not going to let you do that. But it was so gradual and incremental that before you knew it, all healthcare decisions are the healthcare ship in the US is being steered by business interest nearly exclusively.
Wow.
And it's wrong. It's wrong. It's dangerous. And we're going to have a disaster of titanic proportions if we don't, wrest control of the healthcare ship back from business interests.
Yeah, that's I can see that. I could see that. So as you are if I was going to go pick up your book, now you really intrigued me. But if I was going to go when I go and pick up your book, what is it that you hope a reader will get out of your stories, get out of your examples and your research? What do you want that reader to take away?
I would love a reader to go into their doctor's office the next time and say, I read this book by this guy named Drew, and he told me that I need to become a much more engaged partner with you in my healthcare. And then you'll have to, when you've announced that to your doctor, you'll have to get up out of your chair and help them back into their seat because they will have passed out and surprised. Now, not all doctors will be ready for patients being that involved. They'll say, hey, now you're getting in my lane, step back. Then you'll know if that's what your doctor says to you, that's the wrong doctor to be with, no matter how good they are as a doctor. Again, if any medical intervention showed that you cut your mortality rate risk in half, you'd be hearing it'd be trumpeted left and right. And if it was a drug that was doing it, it'd be making gazillions of dollars. But the reason you don't hear about it is there's no way to monetize it. I mean, you can't be charged more because you're a more involved and dedicated and adherent patient to a plan that you've helped devise. Nobody can make money off of that. You're the only one who benefit. Well, I would benefit too if you were my patient because I'd have more satisfaction out of treating you. So that's why it's not common knowledge. That's why,
Yeah.
that's why and
Yeah.
then
So can you give us kind of can you give us some examples? Because I know you tell short stories, like little, um, examples. Can you share like a story, an example?
I'll have to give a very brief one because the ones that are most interesting are lengthy, trauma, life and death type cases in the emergency
Mm.
department, which we do see fairly regularly. A guy I saw who tried to kill himself by cutting off his head and nearly succeeded. Amazing, yeah. Another guy who tried to kill himself by stabbing himself multiple times in the belly and chest, and then driving his car into the overpass of a bridge. Fortunately, neither of them succeeded. Um, and so those kind of cases are in my book. The main reason being is I knew a lot of the topics in my book are kind of grim and heavy, and I, everything I write, I try to leaven with a little bit of a dose of humor throughout. But I also wanted the I wouldn't characterize my book as a memoir per se, but it has more memoir elements of both my experiences treating patients and my experience as a patient to make the more grim and heavy duty stuff more tolerable and keep the reader reading through to the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a very simple case I saw, for example, some woman came in, she's like in her mid 40s, and first thing that bothered me was she'd be given a patient examination gown to get out of her clothes and get into, which was sitting at the end of the bed, right where the nurse left it. And a lot of people, the physical exam of the patient, which is a critical part of making this connection. I'm taking the time not only to look you in the face, I'm examining your body, I'm paying attention to what you tell me is you're feeling poorly. That literal physical connection of the touching of the patient by the doctor is healing in and of itself. So you know, so I said, well, then I let that slide for the moment and said, well, what made you come to the emergency department today? She's there with a couple of other adult relatives. I think it was her brother and sister-in-law. And so she's laying back on a stretcher and she pulls up her blouse. And she thought, well, this is all I needed to see. Said I fell asleep with the heating pad on and I burned my abdomen,
Mm.
which well, that can happen actually, and that's why you see those warnings on heating pads. But it usually happens in such elderly people who don't have the strength to move off the painful heating pad when it's getting superheated, or
Ah.
they're sedated because they're taking heavy duty pain medicines or some other sedating medicine. This was not an elderly woman or a sedated person. I was a little skeptical about that description, and I looked a little closer, and sure enough, she had a couple of tiny blisters there, which makes it a second degree burn, a deeper burn than a first degree or sunburn. That's even less credible. So I did what I was going to do anyway, which is examine the rest of her. So I got around behind her, lifted up her blouse in the back to listen to her lungs. Have you heard of shingles as a condition before?
Absolutely.
Well, then, ta-da, there's the whole answer. If you look at her back, she's got a classic shingles rash on her back, which is extending around to her abdomen. If I hadn't bothered to go back there and look, I would have given her something for pain and away she goes. She wouldn't have died from that, but when you treat shingles with appropriate antiviral medicines, people get better quicker and they're less likely to have ongoing persistent pain. The system is telling me don't spend that time with that patient, Drew. Get in, get out, get that patient in and out because it doesn't take a business genius. The bean counters know the more people you can run through the system, the more bills you can generate, the more money you can make. And that's all they're interested in, really. They don't want me killing people because they don't want to be sued. But so
That gives
that
me, I am so grateful to an emergency room physician. I had a terrible bike accident, a bicycle accident. People always thought it was a motorcycle because I looked so bad. I
Mhm.
banged myself up something terrible. And I said that, I hurt inside and they did everything. They couldn't find any broken bones, nothing. But one physician, he just wouldn't let it go. And he saved my life because I had ripped my liver.
Oh boy, I was going to guess your spleen, but
Yeah, well, that's what he thought. He said maybe it's the spleen. We should go in and look. But he just wouldn't. He was dogged, and he had other patients, and there were gunshot wounds. It was in the Bronx. There were gunshot wounds over here, and there were knife stabbings over here, and here this, lady that's just like, oh, I hurt. And he was just dogged. I so admire what you do. And you're right, when they push you doctors to move on, it hurts us as well. Is
no
there a
doubt.
solution to this, Dr. Drew? Is there a
Well, I think as I said, we have to get the bean counters out of the helm. They can't be behind the helm of the ship. They can be in a room in the back, and when we want their business advice, we can go back and say, "Hey, give us a business advice as to how we can make ends meet here financially, so we can pay our staff adequately and stock the hospital adequately." But now, if they had a national referendum when they said, "Okay, who do you want to be in charge of healthcare in the U.S., the business people or the physicians?" If they put it to a vote, it would be a no-brainer vote. Everybody would have voted physicians, but it wasn't put to a vote. It's just the amount of money involved in healthcare in the U.S. has gotten so astronomically high that The-
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
business
we
people,
have to, so what you're saying to us is that we have to, therefore, as patients, we have to be the one that encourages that doctor to take the extra step and let us be partners because they have so much pressure on them to move me along. Am I
and if
getting
I
that
don't
right?
exactly, and if I don't perform to their satisfaction, I'm fired. My job is at risk. So in certain ways, as patients, we have more power to change the system than we do as physicians because they don't want to fire you as a patient. They want you coming back. So you need to threaten to vote with your feet by, I'm not going to, you need to, I would encourage people to write letters to actually what I encourage them to do is ask, I want to speak to the CEO of the hospital about my latest experience in the emergency department. I noticed everybody was busy, 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 and I was there for 3 hours. It doesn't seem like you have adequate staff to do all the work that needs to be done. You ask to speak to the CEO to pass along that message. Of course, you won't get the CEO. Well, who can I speak to? And when you do get somebody, hopefully you get somebody and you say, I need to let you know that I'm considering going to the hospital across town. Hopefully they don't own that one as well.
There's
Nobody says
that.
something. And so if they're threatened with losing their business, I think hospitals might pay attention. Physicians alone, we don't, patients blame us because why did you let the system get the way it is? Well, if we had a vote in the process, we would vote. We're pretty stubborn, opinionated group, physicians. It's hard to get us agreed on a whole lot of things, but there's pretty widespread agreement that, we've let the business people ride herd on us. It's time to wrest control of the ship back from the business people and to torture that ship analogy. I'd say it's an all hands on deck emergency. Patients and physicians, the partnership I'm talking about, you derive immediate benefit in terms of your individual health by partnering with your doctor, and by patients partnering with physicians, we can institute systemic changes, I believe. My book is pretty grim throughout. Again, I tried to leaven it with some humor and the cases and my own patient experience, but I build to a more hopeful conclusion towards the end. So it doesn't end on us. I think people who read it will think, I think most people will think, well, that was worthwhile.
Yeah. So should we buy this book and give it to our physicians?
I've been thrilled when a number of people who've the reviews. I've got about 75 reviews. About half of them are on Amazon, but the other half are scattered among Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, and my publisher's website. And I've had a number of patients comment that they were going to buy a second copy to give to their doctor. What I haven't
Yeah.
heard yet is I've heard from physicians who appreciate the insights that I've offered. And some of it is just what can go wrong in the interaction between patient and physician, and how can we be aware of that and avoid that? I haven't had a doctor say, I'm buying copies of your book to put on in the waiting room for people to look at or free copies to take. And that would be grand.
That'd be something, wouldn't it? So the name of this show is What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? And so we've been talking about your writing, but can we talk about your reading before we run out of time here? So is there a book or books that you could recommend to our audience?
Well, for my own reading, a lot of it is I've been doing a lot of reading within healthcare as research for my book, and I'm getting a little tired of it. Before I started writing the book, I used to alternate between escapist fiction and more realistic fiction or more reality-based fiction or nonfiction. Um, but the two authors I really like are the Lee Child series, the Jack Reacher series,
Mm-hmm.
and then um, the other series by Daniel Silva, the Gabriel Alone Spy series.
Oh yeah, that's a good, he's good.
I think I like both of those series because the good guys and bad guys are clearly delineated, and the good guy prevails at the end. So, which isn't true in
Yeah.
healthcare.
And that doesn't always happen in your world, right? Do you have a copy of your book handy that you could show the
That was
audience?
I. My parent not in the room. Apparently, I moved it.
No?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I'm so sorry.
Not to
That was
worry.
poor
We'll
planning.
post a picture of it.
Good.
So I just want to say thank you so much. Now, people are going to want to buy your book. They're going to want to find you on online. So, what's the best way for our audience to be in touch?
People can feel free to email me directly at my personal email, which is easy. It's Drew Remy, DREWREMI @gmail.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook, and the essays that I've adapted from my book, which are shorter reads, which give you an idea whether you want to commit to the book, um, are on those two. So in order to find me there, if you spell my name, you don't even spell all of Remignati, which is kind of a mouthful and a tedious process. You can spell Remign, and mine is the only name that starts that way. You'll see a bunch of other Remignantis there who are my extended family members, but I'm the only Drew in the book. And on each of the websites, LinkedIn and Facebook, there are links to the book itself and links to the essays. I have a media page. I have my own web page. You can get to that and learn more about it. And if you have doubts about whether you want to spend the time, I'm at the point now where I don't really even care. I do care if people buy my book. I'd love more people to buy it. But I'm kind of a frugal guy myself. When I want a book, I go to my local public library. It's an excellent library. I say, if they don't have it there, I say, can you get it on interlibrary loan? Ask your library to buy it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's for all of us writers. We want people to get it from the library, buy it from their local independent store, buy it from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever they can get their books. So I hope all of you I hope we've piqued your interest. Do read some of the essays. They're really interesting. And then buy the book, two copies, one for you and one for your physician. And if you
That
have a
would be
lot of
ideal.
physicians, there you go. Buy a bundle.
That would
I
be
want to
ideal.
thank you, right? I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope that when you get in touch with Dr. Drew, one of the things you're going to tell him is that you met him on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'll see you all next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Thanks so much, Karen.